Ladies and gentlemen, welcome to the grand opening and dedication ceremony for the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. Please stand if you're able for the rendering of honors and remain standing for the National Anthem and invocation. General Powell defers honors to all veterans who are here and their families. To perform the National Anthem, former Army Reserve Sergeant Melissa Neal.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets' red glare, the bombs bursting in air, gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say, does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
Representing the United States Coast Guard, Lieutenant Benjamin Mayhew will offer the invocation.
Almighty God, today we are assembled to dedicate this memorial and museum. This place is sacred to this city, this state, and our nation. Bless us with your presence and withhold not your blessings. We need this place so that we never forget why we are a great nation. The men and women who have sacrificed will not be forgotten by us. Those of us who now serve walk in their shadow and follow in their legacy. Our future success as a military and as a nation depends on our ability to honor the sacrifices of the past and perpetuate the willingness to give all for our country. As you have said, greater love hath no man than this, that a man lay down his life for his friend. Truly no greater love was shown than when your Son gave his life for all men. We will always be great, so long as we receive that gift, memorialize the past, and carry that momentum into the future. So go with us through this ceremony and this day and throughout our lives. Continue to prosper the armed forces and safeguard the future of the United States of America. I pray these things in your almighty, wonderful, and powerful name. Amen.
Thank you. You may be seated. Please welcome to the podium today's Master of Ceremonies, Michael Morris, Chairman of the Board of the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, which served as the project manager for the National Veterans Memorial and Museum.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon and welcome to the grand opening ceremony of the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. I'm Mike Morris, the chairman of the board of the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation, better known as CDDC, under the leadership of Guy Worley, who has served as the project manager for the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. I'd like to recognize the other CDC members in the audience today. If you'd simply stand for a quiet moment, we'll give you a round of applause. I'm truly glad I didn't have to name each and every one of you, as I'm sure you are. So it's my privilege to join so many veterans and national heroes of this historic afternoon. We stand here in front of an iconic building filled with exhibits that inspire and educate. And I'm reminded of how it all started. And like all good things, it took time. It took effort. We began in 2012, and by the end of 2015, we actually had shovels in the ground. A building structure that had never been tried before by architects and designers who thought it would be something outstanding. And in fact, as you go through it, I'm sure you will realize that it is, and you can see that from where you sit now. All that hard work and effort that went into this project has now come to fruition. When we began the memorial and museum, we knew it would be important to downtown Columbus, but seeing it now, I think we can all agree that it's important and necessary for our country. There has never been a more important time to honor our veterans. There has really never been a more important time to hear their stories and understand their journey and understand the dedication that men and women give so that we can all be here today in the freedom of this great nation. This museum will allow you and us all to celebrate the service and honor those sacrifices of those veterans who have served before and those veterans who will still serve with us and enjoy it as they go through it. Before we move on to the next phase of this program today, I'd be obviously remiss if I didn't thank some key partners who made this activity in this museum a reality. I'd like to thank the Franklin County Commissioners, Kevin Boyce, Marilyn Brown, and John O'Grady. I'd like to thank the state of Ohio for all their work and the dedication of Governor Kasich, Speaker Smith and Senate President Aboff, who understood the value of telling the veteran's story. I'd like to thank our corporate philanthropic community, many of whom contributed to this activity to make it possible. And finally, I'd like to thank those veterans and their family members who are featured in this museum. Some of you have already had a chance to go through and listen to some of the exhibits. Those of you who have not yet had that opportunity will be touched as you go through and listen to those stories. It's impossible not to have a tear in your eye or a lump in your throat when you hear why and how dedicated men and women went to serve this great nation. So we have a very special ceremony today. It gives me great pleasure to welcome Staff Sergeant. It gives me great pleasure, I should say, to welcome the son of one of the leaders who helped us put this activity together. Those of you who were with us earlier on in the museum know that Senator John Glenn was instrumental in making a reality of today happen. And this was a very important and personal activity to the senator as he continued tirelessly to work to see this done. And we all only wish that he could be here, although we know he is. We wish that he could be here physically with us. But in his stead, I'd like to introduce David Glenn, his son, who will share a few words for us. David?
Back in the winter of 1952, I had just turned 7 years old, My dad was driving my mother and my sister and I up from where we were living with my grandparents in New Concord up to the Columbus airport. And I remember it was totally dark and it was raining really, really hard. Thank God it's not raining here so far today. But we were just getting close to the airport, and then my mother suddenly began to sob and sob because my dad was going off to fight in Korea. She didn't know if she was ever going to see him again. That's a really vivid memory for me. I'll bet most of you in this audience today have similar memories. That little story I started with was the very first thing I thought of when I thought about being here today. But it brought up a lot of other stuff that I hadn't thought about for a long time. For my father, nothing in his life was more formative and significant than his military service. It was so important that in his later years, he got to where he could hardly talk about it without choking up. He was embarrassed by that, and he brought this up to me several times. He said that the older he got, the more trouble he had with it. So helping with the creation of this National Veterans Memorial and Museum was really important to him. I wish he was here to see it. Beyond my father's military experience, I realized as I thought about this that there have been several other people in my life that this museum is definitely for and about. The first person was my best friend in high school, Cap. That was his nickname. He flew helicopters with the Air Cav in Vietnam. He flew Cobras and Hueys and Jet Rangers. He was there for a year. I was living in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time that he came back from Vietnam. So I drove up to pick him up at Travis Air Force Base, which is not far away from where I was living out in the San Francisco Bay Area at the time. The first thing I remember is how he freaked out when we started down the freeway at 65 miles an hour because he hadn't been at those kind of speeds on the ground in over a year. But then we began to talk, and we talked almost all night. He was involved in a large amount of fighting. He told me awful thing after awful thing, and I won't repeat any of that here. But he said he just did what he had to do, and he got through it. I asked him recently if he ever went to any reunions of his unit, the Silver Spurs. And he said no, because his two best friends got killed over there. The second person I wanted to talk about was my roommate from college for 4 years, Al. Al was an infantry platoon leader in Vietnam. He had been in the field with his platoon for several months and was finally scheduled to be relieved and reassigned to headquarters. On the very day that he was to be relieved, they were ambushed while out on patrol. There was just one quick burst of fire, and as Al put it, 2 bullets connected. One bullet took off his radio operator's thumb. Another hit Al in the belly, going crosswise, going through both his liver and out his spleen. He survived after 4 surgeries. The third person is my first cousin, Tom. Sorry folks. Tom was a door gunner on a helicopter, and he got shot down, but he got through it. These guys are like brothers to me, but these are just 3 people from my life. Think of how many stories all of the people here could tell about yourselves and your family and your own friends. It's what this place is all about. My eldest son, Daniel, as it turns out, is a clinical psychologist at UCLA. He works with a program called Operation Mend, which is for veterans of the Afghan and Iraqi wars. Daniel's specialty is post-traumatic stress syndrome. He works with the aftermath of war, which is appalling. The suffering is appalling. It can go on and on. But therapies available today are gradually becoming more effective, even many years after the trauma. As I kept thinking, I remembered books I had read, like The Things They Carried by Tim O'Brien, Fields of Fire by Jim Webb, and most powerfully for me, Matterhorn by Karl Marlantes. And then finally, the thought occurred to me that 'twas ever thus, that being willing to fight and die to protect your people, feeling that that was your duty, has always been one aspect of the human experience, right from hunter-gatherer times down to the present moment. That willingness is so beautifully and powerfully expressed in that famous Bible verse, John 15:13, that was part of the invocation here today. Greater love has no one than this, that one lays down one's life for one's friends. I believe that reflecting on that willingness, that love, is what made my father choke up when he tried to talk about his war experiences. It's what made Al, even though he believed the Vietnam War to be a terrible mistake, able to go out day after day and just try to do his job and keep his guys alive. It's what made Cap and Tom able to fly missions day after day, to support the grunts on the ground like Al. It's what made my dad able to fly his fighter straight at a whole formation of MiGs, all by himself, to try to save his buddy who had been hit and had low airspeed, was a sitting duck. My dad said his training taught him to be more afraid of bad things happening to him, to his buddies, afraid of bad things happening to his buddies than to him. It didn't mean to throw your life away, but it meant to value their lives at least as much as your own. This is deeply important stuff, a deeply important subject to pay attention to. In my mind, it has to do with deeply ethical behavior, the golden rule, and the common good, all wrapped up somehow together. It's the antithesis, the very opposite of just looking out for number one. And this new museum, the National Veterans Memorial and Museum, with its motto to honor, connect, inspire, and educate, will help us all to reflect on that experience of war and of service. Thank you.
The National Veterans Memorial and Museum represents the story of many veterans' lives, as you know, and they come from all corners of this great nation. We wanted to recognize the scope officially, so Guy Worley and the CDDC team worked with our congressional leaders to secure a federal designation. We've invited the 4 key members of the delegation who helped to get that necessary piece of legislation passed. In June of 2018, the President signed the bill into law, and it officially designated this facility as the National Veterans Memorial and Museum. Join me now in welcoming Senator Rob Portman, whose steadfast leadership began the process in the United States Senate to get done what the House had already done. Senator Portman.
Mike, thank you very much. And to my friend David, with whom I serve on the Glenn College Advisory Board, your dad would have been very proud of you today. Well done. Mike, to all of you here involved with the CDDC, Guy Worley here in the front row, congratulations. This has been an amazing project, and you have, at the end of the day, produced a remarkable tribute to our veterans. Guy tells the story of me coming here during the construction and seeing this monument that is unique in the world. The concrete work in particular is unprecedented. The workers thought I was the architect, and they were very upset with me because it was so difficult to construct. I assured them I didn't have the creativity to be an architect, and they had just given me a promotion. To my friend General Colin Powell, thank you for being here. You honor us with your presence. VA Secretary Robert Wilkie, thanks for coming. He promised he's going to come back a lot. And so many here have been involved with this noble project from the start. But I must say, what we've learned here today is, once again, that when Les Wexner has a dream, no matter how audacious it might seem, he will do what it takes to make that dream come true. Thank you, Les. On behalf of our veterans and their families, thank you to Les and Abigail for their extraordinary commitment to this project. General Farrader walked me around in one of my last visits and showed me some of the storyboards and what was coming, these unique and moving stories from John Glenn to some nameless patriots from previous wars who gave the ultimate sacrifice. This is going to be just such an extraordinary opportunity to honor, pay tribute, to thank those who have made so many sacrifices. I thought then, and I thought again today, I wish my dad could be here. He was a World War II vet, my grandfather a World War I vet, both Army infantry, and Andy Ginther's dad is here, I saw today, a Vietnam vet, and I thought, I'm jealous of you, Andy. I wish my dad could be here with me, but I know they're watching, as are so many. I was asked if I could speak about one veteran today from Ohio. And as you may know, I'm in elected office, and there are 850,000 veterans in Ohio, so I've got to just pick one. That's very hard to do. I'm going to cheat a little bit. I'm going to pick two. And I'm going to tell a story about resiliency and patriotism. For those who don't know him, Colonel Tom Moe is a few rows back here today. He was a decorated combat pilot who was shot down in Vietnam, spent years at the Hanoi Hilton, as he calls it, which was the same prison camp and close to the same prison cell where John McCain was. When I was elected to the Senate back in 2010, Tom Moe came up to the swearing in, and so did Neil Armstrong. And the night before, we were in the U.S. Capitol having a dinner, and Colonel Moe came up to me and said, "Rob, I see Neil Armstrong is here. Let me tell you a story." And he got into the story, and I said, whoa, stop. Let's walk over and talk to Neil. So I introduced them, and Tom Moe proceeded to tell him this extraordinary story. He told him how the North Vietnamese captors had tried to break them down by keeping any good news about America away from them, and in fact, telling them a lot of bad news. They wanted to believe, the POWs to believe, that America was in decline, that we were losing the war, and that our country was giving up on them. In particular, they didn't want to tell about Apollo. They had told them that President Kennedy's stirring call to land a man on the moon within the decade had failed. Then one day, one of Tom's fellow prisoners got a letter from his mom. And for some reason, that particular letter got through, probably because the prison guard thought the letter would make the prisoner feel even worse. Not only did they allow it to get through, but they made a mistake. They kept the postage stamp on. The stamp was of Neil Armstrong stepping onto the moon. The prisoner who received it immediately began tapping out in Morse code on the pipes what he had received from his mother. Tom said to Neil Armstrong, "Mr. Armstrong, when we all heard about that, it gave all of us incredible inspiration and strength. I want to thank you for that." For those of you who knew him, and for those of you who have seen the movie First Man, for that matter, you know that Neil Armstrong was not a very emotional guy. His eyes welled up. He showed emotion. He embraced our good friend, Tom, and then he said, "God bless you for what you've done." So to Tom Moe today and to all our veterans, we thank you. This isn't a story about one veteran. It's a story about the pride and patriotism that motivates our brave men and women in uniform. It's a story about their resilience, and of course, it's a story about their sacrifice that they make on behalf of all the rest of us. This National Veterans Memorial Museum gives us the opportunity to tell that story and to say thanks from a grateful nation.
Thank you very much, Senator. It was a very meaningful speech that you gave. to show that bipartisanship is not lost in a great state like Ohio, Senator Brown joined with Senator Portman to make certain that the bill that came out of the House was able to go in front of the President after being approved by the Senate. And I'd now like to invite Senator Sherrod Brown to share his thoughts on the Veterans Memorial.
Thank you, Michael. It's an honor to be here. Secretary Powell, Alma, thank you for your patriotism and standing up always for our country. Secretary Wilkie, a terrific addition to the President's cabinet, who already has paid a lot of attention to Ohio's veterans hospitals and community-based outpatient clinics and veterans. Generally, as Rob said, 800,000+ veterans in Ohio. David Glenn, how we miss your father and admire you and Annie and your sister. Thank you. My friend and colleague Rob Portman, to Congresswoman Beatty, especially, and Congressman Stivers, thank you. And the entire Ohio delegation that came together on this, as we should. To Les Wexner, thank you, and General Ferriter, and to Michael Morris, thanks for all of you. And Mayor, nice to see you and to join in this celebration. Thanks to all veterans and service members who are here. There are hundreds of you, including sitting next to my wife, Samantha Sawmiller, U.S. Marine Corps, served in Iraq and serves veterans in our office. Thank you, Samantha, for being here. Thanks to your families, all of you who sacrifice alongside you. I don't think we think often enough when we talk about police officers and firefighters, first responders, and members of the military. We don't think enough about the sacrifice of their families who worry every single day about their loved one. This museum is for all of you. We've had far too many reminders this week about how divided our country has become. You see the healing, perhaps, of these divisions on this stage, but we have seen how divided our country has become. The attempted package bombings, the terrible shooting in Kentucky, the devastating news this morning of a shooting at a synagogue in Pittsburgh, all weigh heavily on our hearts. We're so grateful to law enforcement who work to keep everyone safe, including those in Pittsburgh at that synagogue who put themselves in harm's way to protect others. We won't tolerate hate. We won't tolerate violence against our neighbors. We must heal the divisions, as I think we're doing here today, and bring our country together. We are Americans first. There are so many things far more important than party politics, something we all need to remember. Thank you. Honoring our heroes is one of them. Our veterans, those who answered the call to serve, represent the best of us. We are all at our best when we follow their example and come together as Americans. That's how we got this museum built. That's how this incredible community stood up and did this. It's what this place will do, bring Americans, regardless of political views, regardless of race, regardless of background, together to honor veterans. This project has been a long time coming. This May, I had the privilege of touring the museum with Guy and Amy and Janelle. And it's incredible to see this vision come to life. I want to thank everyone who got this museum built. It was a passion project, as David said, for Colonel Glenn, for General Glenn, a life defined by service. It's so fitting that this place would be another, probably not even a final, another addition to John Glenn's legacy. And I thank everyone who worked to designate this important place as our country's national Veterans Memorial and Museum in Columbus, Ohio. It's a testament to how, when it comes to our women and men in uniform, Ohio puts politics aside and get to work. I'm the longest serving Ohioan on the Senate Veterans Committee. I'm proud we are, Mr. Secretary, perhaps the most bipartisan committee in the United States Senate. For this project, Senator Portman and I worked together, as we always do. We reached out to Senators Murkowski and Cantwell, and we worked together to get this through the Senate. And in the House, Congresswoman Beatty, Congressman Stivers, and Congressman Berry, and the entire delegation worked together to pass this legislation dedicating this place in Columbus, Ohio as our country's national tribute to our veterans, because there is no more fitting place in the United States to pay tribute to these men and women than here in this state in the middle of our country. David, you're a reminder to Ohioans. Your story underscored that. Like your father, who fought under our flag in far-off lands, who left families, who missed birthdays, who missed holidays, who sacrificed their health, and sometimes sacrificed their lives, all in service to this great country which they loved. And there are so many here in our state continuing that proud tradition today. At the gym of the Air Force, the Wright-Patterson Air Force Base, at Rickenbacker, at the Youngstown Air Reserve Station, at Camp Ravenna, at Mansfield-Lam in my hometown, at Toledo and Springfield, all over our state. John Glenn once said, "The happiest and most fulfilled people I've known are those who devoted themselves to something bigger and more profound than merely their own self-interest." That says it all. Those are the men and women we honor. Those are the stories that will be told and are being told inside these walls. Americans who dedicated their lives to something bigger and more profound than we are individually. One quality that runs through so many veterans I meet, whether David's father, whether my own father, a World War II veteran, or the veterans I talk to at roundtables around our state, is humility. Veterans rarely speak about their service. They rarely brag. They rarely ask for recognition. But oh, how they've earned it. This memorial will give them the recognition they would never seek and never ask for. This museum will tell their stories. That's why this project is so very important. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Senator Brown. And now, as we all remember from our civics class, nothing gets done until a bill comes out of the House of Representatives. And I'd like to bring to the stage Representative Stivers, who is forever long working on this, and I think many of you know is currently a high-ranking official in the United States Reserves. Senator Stivers, your comments, please.
Thanks, Mike. General Powell, Secretary Wilkie, Mr. Wexner, honored guests. It's great to be with you today. Today is an incredible day for our nation's veterans. I played a teeny part. I sponsored the bill with Joyce, Beatty, and Pat Berry that the Ohio delegation and the rest of Congress came around on and helped make happen. This national designation is really important because every monument and museum doesn't have to be in Washington, D.C. It's great to have one here in the heartland. Don't you think, Mayor? I want to thank personally all the Ohio delegation members that took time to be with us today and quickly introduce them. Congressman Bill Johnson, Congressman Warren Davidson, Congressman Jim Renacci, Congressman Troy Balderson, of course, Congresswoman Joyce Beatty that you will hear from. And I don't know if Pat Berry's here or not, but Pat had a big part in this too, and I hope he's here. I didn't see him. But I want to thank all of them. Let's give them a big round of applause. As Mike said, I'm not just a member of Congress. I'm also a 33-year member of the Ohio National Guard and a veteran. And on behalf of our Adjutant General, Major General Mark Bartman, who's somewhere out here in the audience, I want to, and the 16,000 airmen and soldiers of the Ohio National Guard, I want to say thank you to everyone who made this happen. This museum and memorial is about the 40 million Americans who served their country. And they served, by the way, it's raining, they served in rain, they served in snow, they served in cold, they served in heat, they served in humidity. They served every day in peace and sometimes in war to preserve our freedoms. And I think we all owe them a great debt of gratitude, and that's what this living memorial and museum is about. It's going to honor their service for a long time to come. I'm proud to have been a small part of it. Thank you, and God bless you all.
Taking that oath obviously meant a great deal to them, and you can see no partisanship as they stood by each other and said those same and important words. And then continuing in the bipartisanship that we have here in this state, I'm happy to introduce Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, another critical member of our delegation who worked hand in hand with the other side of the aisle, as they like to say in Washington, to help make this happen. Congresswoman.
Thank you, Mike, and to Guy Worley, to Les Wexner and Abigail Wexner, to General Powell and Alma Powell, to Dave Glenn, and to my colleagues in the Senate, Senator Brown and Senator Portman, and my colleague, Congressman Steve Stivers. Or the land of the free and the home of the brave. Today let our rejoicing rise as high as the listening sky. I am humbled and honored to stand on this stage, excited to be just a small part of making this reality come true. When I think of the late Senator John Glenn and Les Wexner, both friends, both having a dream and a vision, and then when I think of the veterans and what they had done and how they have served, today, how could we not be proud to see this facility being here today? David, I can say I knew your father. I can say I spent many days in their home. And Annie would always come across and say, "Hi, Joyce, how are you?" Having you here today means the world not only to this community, not only to this state, but to this country. Because today we celebrate a national museum and memorial for veterans. I was asked to say a few words, thank you, about service. Today is important to me because, like many others, my father was a veteran. He served in World War II. Like many others, I knew what it was like to hear the stories of all the things that he had done. So I was honored to be a part of this. In the video, you saw a brave female, Tammy Duckworth, now Senator Duckworth, but she started with me in my class in the United States Congress. Today, when you leave here, and for those who will go across the street and walk through this National Museum, I want you to pay special attention to the words that are engraved across the front wall. Words that say honor, connect, inspire, and educate. That is why we are here. I stand on this stage proud as a Black woman because this museum is about all of us. As I look to this stage, all of those standing and sitting behind us who have bravely served, it makes me proud when I go in this museum. Having you here, Secretary Wilkie, means a lot to us because you see how we do it in Columbus, Ohio. And I'm going to remind you that this is the 3rd congressional district. So we don't ask for much, we just ask for a lot. We're going to hear some very nice words from you. I will remind you of them later when we are in Washington. And lastly, let me say, it is an honor to stand here. It is an honor to stand here because so many people fought that we could have the freedom that we have today. And certainly we know that freedom is not free. There is a cost for it. And thank you to all of those who are in earshot and all of those who served. I end by saying, God bless America and God bless us. I am Congresswoman Joyce Beatty, and I approve today's message.
And it now gives me great pleasure to introduce the 10th Secretary of Veterans Affairs, the Honorable Robert Wilkie. Mr. Wilkie was confirmed by the United States Senate on July the 23rd of this year and was sworn in on July 30th after earlier serving as the VA's acting secretary. Before coming to the Veterans Administration, Mr. Wilkie was Undersecretary of Defense for Personnel and Readiness, the principal advisor to the Secretary and Deputy Secretary of Defense, and the Total Force Management. He has over 20 years of experience at the national and international levels as Undersecretary of Defense. Mr. Wilkie served James Mattis as Assistant Secretary of Defense. He served both Robert Gates and Donald Rumsfeld. Before that, Mr. Wilkie was Special Assistant to the President of the National Security Affairs and a Senior Director of the National Security Council. For 5 years, he was Vice President of Strategic Programs for CH2M Hill, one of the largest engineering and program management firms in the world. He is an officer in the United States Air Force Reserves. He previously served in the Navy Reserves with Joint Force Intelligence Command, Naval Special Warfare Group 2, and Officer of Naval Intelligence. Among his many awards and decorations, Mr. Wilkie is the recipient of the Defense Distinguished Public Service Medal, the highest non-career civilian award for that department. Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome VA Secretary Mr. Robert Wilkie.
Thank you very much. I'm going to change my opening. After the Congresswoman gave that remarkable introduction, I'm going to tell her how Columbus, Ohio affected my life. Now, I'm not, as someone from the Deep South, going to come up here and talk about football. But my father was very badly wounded in the invasion of Cambodia. He was so badly wounded that we didn't see him for a year. He was at the Tripler Army Hospital in Honolulu, and one day he received a special visit from a retired United States Navy commander by the name of Wayne Woodrow Hayes. Coach Hayes saw a young officer in distress, and he urged him to get well. Don't let the doctors tell you you can't do it. Get back to Fort Bragg and do what you love. Just serve the country. Coach Hayes had such an effect and impact on my father that when Ohio State ventured down to New Orleans to play Alabama in the 1970s, my father and I went, and into that cauldron of Bear Bryant worshipers, he wore a hat that said, "Woody is God." Now, don't get too happy. Alabama won 35-6. But General Powell, General Ferriter, ladies and gentlemen, distinguished members of the Ohio Congressional Delegation, veterans, and the wonderful people of the Buckeye State. General Powell, it is an honor to be on the same stage with you. Nobody has given as much to our country in my lifetime, and your example, both in uniform and as a global statesman, is worthy of everything that makes this country great. And to David Glenn, this is a testament to the vision of a humble man whose self-effacing patriotism and faith in the American spirit brought this nation together, and as Lincoln said, appealed to the better angels of our nature. Colonel John H. Glenn, Jr., United States Marine Corps. So now you know a little bit about my background. I have been privileged to see this military life from many angles. As a dependent, as the son of a gravely wounded combat soldier, as an officer, and a senior leader in the Pentagon. I have watched those who have borne the battle, and I have seen the world through the eyes of my classmates and friends at Fort Sill and Fort Bragg, whose fathers did not come home. For those reasons, I am humbled and proud to see this magnificent building rise in the name of America's veterans. It may seem odd for someone with my background to constantly contemplate the meaning of service and the meaning of what it means to be a veteran. And I think General Eisenhower had it about right. In 1953, he invited 40 Korean War veterans onto the presidential yacht Williamsburg. Some were horribly disfigured. Others were missing limbs. And General Eisenhower said to them that their country could never repay them for what they had given America, but they had a charge from him that they never put their uniforms away. You live to remind your fellow citizens why they sleep soundly at night. This museum, this place, reminds all Americans that they sleep soundly at night because of the sacrifice of millions of ordinary men and women. It is fitting that this museum opens its doors to America to mark the 100th anniversary of the end of the war to end all wars. 100 years ago, my great-grandfather left a small-town law practice in Mississippi to join up with the 82nd Infantry Regiment assembling at Camp Gordon, Georgia. In another part of the country, my wife's grandfather, who was a teenager and had never ventured much beyond 2 or 3 counties in North and South Carolina, was preparing to march up the Champs-Élysées into the bloody cauldron of the Meuse-Argonne before he was 18. The Bible that I took my oath on in the Oval Office was carried into battle by him. And the penciled-in inscription on the back said, "If found, please return to my mother. These words mean a great deal to me." Needham Roberts and William Johnson were also there, members of the legendary 369th Infantry Regiment, a regiment that General Powell and his friend Charlie Rangel have spent a lifetime reminding Americans of the heroism of these special people. This was the first unit comprised of African American soldiers to serve with the Expeditionary Force during World War I. They spent 191 days in the front lines in the trenches, more combat duty than any other regiment in the American Army. They suffered 1,500 casualties, more than any other regiment in our Army. The 369th was nicknamed the Hellfighters by the Germans due to the ferocity that they displayed in battle. In May of 1918, Johnson and Roberts alone fought off a 24-man German patrol. Both were severely wounded, yet they fought ferociously until all their ammunition was expended, and then continued to fight hand-to-hand, using a rifle as a club and a bolo knife, killing and wounding every one of that German patrol. Over 100 soldiers from the 369th were presented with American and French decorations. Johnson was the first American to receive the Croix de Guerre. In 2015, both Johnson and Roberts finally received the respects of a grateful nation with the Medal of Honor. Less celebrated a warrior was a nearsighted farmer from Jackson County, Missouri, who cheated to get into the field artillery because he could not bear the thought of watching his friends and neighbors go to war and he not supporting them. He would go on to become one of the greatest presidents in our history. So there they are. Captain A.D. Somerville, Sergeant Alvin York, Private Onslow Bullard, Corporals Needham Roberts and William Johnson, and Captain Harry S. Truman. This is their museum. This is their place, as it is for all of those ordinary citizens who have performed extraordinary deeds in the defense of freedom from Lexington to Afghanistan. All told, more than 41 million American men and women have served during times of war, and thousands gave America their last full measure. This place is for them. And today, in this 21st century, Americans in uniform again bear the burdens of long wars, wars pitting freedom and liberty against fear and oppression. In the future, when generations of Americans who never met a veteran from Lexington or Gettysburg or Belleau Wood or the Meuse Argonne, they can learn about those warriors here. When the generation that fought and won at Iwo Jima and the Bulge have all gone, future generations can learn of their service here. And when generations of Americans too young to know much about Vietnam, where General Powell and my father left so much, they come to visit, this museum will be their teacher. We owe our warriors a debt we can never repay, but we can remember them and what they did and why they have had to be brave for us. So standing here, I'm reminded of the plea of General Matthew Ridgway, who the night before the 82nd Airborne and 101st Airborne Divisions launched the liberation of Europe on June 6, 1944, tossed sleepless on his couch. As General Powell said at General Ridgway's funeral, that great man listened for the promise that God made to Joshua, I will not fail thee nor forsake thee. That is the promise of this place in Columbus, Ohio, to never forsake those ordinary Americans who have never failed us. So thank you to the people of this great state. May God continue to bless our great nation, and may he bless all the men and women, living and past, to whom we give thanks for our freedom. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Secretary. It seems to me the last time I remember Alabama and Ohio State playing, the result was different. You know, now comes a time for me to do something that's difficult to do, to introduce a person who has such an impact on this state, on this country, on this community, on this incredible city. A personal friend of mine, Les Wexner. Les, I think you all know, is the founder, the chair, and the chief executive officer of L Brands. And I think I can stand here confidently and say to you, but for his involvement and that of Abigail, we surely wouldn't be here today to recognize this great and forever lasting memorial. When Les Wexner takes a project on like this, he quietly, continuously, and doggedly sees to it that it happens and that it stands tall among all other memories, so that people will know forever that Central Ohio, Columbus, Ohio, the center of this country, stands strong for the men and women who have given their lives to protect and provide us the freedom that Congresswoman talked about. Les, it's a joy for me to introduce you, and I thank you and Abigail for all that you did. Your turn at the podium.
Thank you, Mr. Secretary. Abigail and I are appreciative and fortunate to be able to participate and help in a project like this. And we talk about, more than one would imagine, how fortunate we are to live in this country and to have the advantages that we have had and that all Americans have. And I think that unique American spirit that Americans try to share with the world. I also had the privilege of working with John Glenn. And if John were here today, maybe this, David, this will ring true with you, and he was saying nice things about what we had done, and people were saying nice things about him, John would say, well, I couldn't have done any of this without Annie. And I want you to thank your mom for being there so steadfastly and being a friend of ours. And she was your dad's partner, as you well know. And one of the fortunate things in my life was to know John Glenn. Well, I have to share with you the emotion of the day and what I've been saying to myself. And I began, preparing remarks and talking about this great day finally and the finality of building the building and it opening. And my innermost thoughts is, this is not the end, this is the beginning. And I want to share with you the optimism and the joy we've had working with so many people of so many interests and so many veterans. And we're planning to build another building. That will be for education and for meetings. We hope kids from all over the country and adults and veterans from all over the country come here for their annual meetings. We're planning now, with the help of sponsors, to be able to digitally record the memories and the lives of every veteran that visits here. And perhaps we can even do it with at a distance with technology. We want to plan to record all the memorabilia, uniforms, medals, papers, and do that digitally so that for every veteran, we can have a, if you would, an electronic warehouse of everyone's memories, their voices, and when their family members, when they come to visit this museum, they can be reminded, and they can also be reminded when they're far away anywhere in the world, if you want to inquire about a brother, an uncle, a grandfather who's ever served, that we can have that information. And particularly to educate ourselves, adults and children, about the great tradition of the American veteran, the citizen soldier, and the things that they represent. Sadly, this week, you have a shooting in Kentucky, bombs sent to national leaders. The shooting today in Pittsburgh was a congregation, a synagogue just like ours in Columbus. And it pauses me to think about the state of our country, obvious deficiencies. And then I was thinking today about the things that bring us together. And what really brings us together is a document that talks about life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Pretty simple but important words. And those are the foundation in my mind of the what of America. And the how of America, how we protect our rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, how we influence countries and people around the world and set that example, not only to defend our own lives, our own liberties, and to provide for our own happiness, but that same high-quality standard of life ambition for citizens all over the world is really the work of the American military. And the military, since 1776, has provided the how. And so when I approach this building, what I think about, and I hope it influences your thinking, is the greatness of our country, the foundation of our country, and our basic beliefs, and that the true advantages that we have, the value that comes from those core beliefs that give us that American exceptionalism, and clearly supported by veterans. 20 million living veterans today, and a total of 41 million Americans have served to protect those values. General Secretary Colin Powell, as being the first chair, probably exemplifies that spirit of life, liberty, the pursuit of happiness, and American exceptionalism in the most obvious and consistent ways, serving our country for so many years in so many capacities and so excellently, so fully, and so self-sacrificingly. And so it's appropriate that he's with us today, and it's appropriate that he is the first chair. Ladies and gentlemen, Colin Powell.
Thank you very much, Lesson. It's a great pleasure to be here on this important day, a wonderful and auspicious occasion where we open this museum to you all. I offer thanks for this museum and the memorial to the men and women who designed it and built it, spent so much time making it really, I think, a perfect building. And I know it'll be taken good care of under the lead of General Michael Ferriter, and I congratulate him for taking on this assignment. Thanks also to the City of Columbus, to Franklin County, to the Columbus Downtown Development Corporation. Thanks to all who gave their time, talent, and treasure to make a vision a reality. A vision given to us by my friend and a heroic Ohioan and an American of great distinction, Senator John Glenn. And especially to the man you just heard from, Les Wexner and his wife Abigail. We wouldn't be here if it wasn't for their passion and their dedication. They turned this vision into reality. What a gift, not only to the veterans of America, but to the citizens of Columbus. So I thank both of you and all of the sponsors of this great day in this great building. I retired from the Army 25 years ago this month, after serving 35 years, 3 months, and 28 days. I immediately became a veteran and was proud to be one. I was honored to join the ranks of 20 million Americans who proudly call themselves veterans. We are all now of the same title and the same rank, veteran. And I'm deeply moved to be here as we bring to life this memorial and museum facility. I'm grateful to have been selected to chair the honorary board that was first chaired by John Glenn. I want to start by talking about some words that were given to me some years ago as I was about to move forward in my career. And it's a story about Abraham Lincoln. And Abraham Lincoln used to escape from the heat of Washington and the problems he faced as president during the beginning of the Cold War. And he used to go up to a place north of the city by the old soldiers' home. But they also had a telegraph office in that building so he could listen to dispatches coming in or have them read to him. And he was there one night preoccupied with the war, everything that was going on, when suddenly a dispatch came in and the telegraph operator was taking it down. And when he was finished, he turned to the president and said, "Mr. President, it's not good news." And the president said, "Well, tell me what's wrong." He said, "Mr. President, a Confederate delegation just attacked a Union encampment out by Manassas Junction. And, sir, they captured a brigadier general and 100 horses." And Lincoln shook his head and he said, "Sure hate to lose 100 horses." And the telegraph operator said to him, "But, Mr. President, what about the brigadier general?" He says, "I can make a brigadier general in 5 minutes. It's hard to replace 100 horses." This quote was put in a frame and was given to me the day I was promoted to brigadier general. I have never forgotten it. And my wife will attest that for the last 39 years since I was promoted, this quotation has always been near my desk. It has always influenced me as a soldier to remember that I have been given privilege of command, privilege of responsibility, but it was the 100 horses that I was there to take care of. It was those 100 horses that I was there to make sure if they were ever sent into battle, they were ready. 100 infantry soldiers ready to go up a hill and sacrifice their lives as necessary to accomplish a mission. 100 sailors going down to the sea in ships. 100 airmen taking off to command the skies. 100 reservists and guardsmen who leave homes and jobs to serve the nation. 100 families who say goodbye and pray that their loved ones will come back to say hello. 100 families that will mourn the loss they have just suffered. 42 million horses, 42 million Americans have served in uniform in the history of our nation. This building will show their faces, their letters, their fears, their bravery, their anxious families waiting for them to return. You will hear their stories. You will see their photos and their videos. The Memorial Grove will be a place for reflection and memory. You will be moved to ask, where do we get such patriots? And the answer is, as it has always been, from everywhere, from city and farm, from every color and origin. They represent the rainbow that is America, the strength and goodness of America. And in this day when we're having trials and tribulations, we've just seen another tragedy in Pittsburgh. Let's remember that basically this is a good place, a welcoming place, a warm place. We are all one team, one family, and let us bring ourselves together again and set aside these terrible incidents that are so contaminating our society at this moment. At a conference a few years ago, a senior religious figure from Great Britain, England, asked me a question after I'd given my speech. It was at Davos, if you've ever heard of that conference. And he said to me, General, why is it such the case that America is so anxious to use hard power as opposed to using soft power to solve problems? And I said to him in return, I believe in soft power. I was known in the Army as the reluctant general, and I was always a reluctant general because I hate war. I don't want to see war. I think we should use diplomacy and political action to try to avoid every war that comes along or might come along. But sometimes war becomes necessary, and it became necessary in World War II. It became necessary that hard power was used to strike down these enemies of democracy and peace. And then I said to the bishop, you know, we brought democracy to our former enemies. We brought them up to be economic giants in the world, Germany and Japan, to a lesser extent Italy. We did all of that. We didn't ask for sovereignty over these lands in return. We did not ask to dominate those lands. We just wanted them to be democracy. And my Lord Bishop, the only thing I can say to you is the only thing America ever asked for was the land to bury our dead. And that's what was necessary to achieve the peace that we now have. He immediately sat down and was quiet for the rest of the day. My good friend Tom Brokaw, the journalist, wrote a book about what he called the greatest generation, the World War II generation. I take nothing away from them, but Tom would agree with me, and I think you will agree with me, that America has been blessed to have greatness in every one of our generations without failure, without any reserve, and there is no generation any greater than the current generation of young men and women who is serving this country around the world today in war and in peace. They are a great generation. Last night I was reflecting again on my time as chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, when I was responsible as a senior military officer for what was going on in Desert Storm, when we were responding to the invasion of Kuwait by Iraq. And some stories came back to me that refreshed my memory and gave me inspiration. In that difficult period when we were starting the conflict, starting the war to kick the Iraqis out of Kuwait, it was the first time anybody had seen this volunteer army of America, not draftees, but a volunteer army that was going into battle for the first time at this size since the Vietnam War. How would they do? What would they be like? The American people saw weapons for the first time that they had not seen before. Cruise missiles and fancy tanks and all kinds of weaponry. And how would it all play out? But I was inspired by a couple of stories that I really picked up on TV, also something new in war, television. And I was in the command center at the Pentagon, and two scenes I'll never forget. One was an F-16 fighter had just landed, returning from a mission. And the young pilot jumped out, and he was walking away from where the reporters were. And his name, of all things, was Jet Jernigan, believe it or not. And as he was walking away, they shouted at him, "What was it like? What's going on? How do you feel?" He said, "I feel great. I thank God that I completed my mission and got back here safely. I thank God that I'm an American. I thank God that I'm an American fighter pilot. Yes, 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 yes. And the other story is a little simpler. I was watching this tank crew standing in front of a tank just before the ground war was about to begin. And the great reporter Sam Donaldson approached them. Sam is a dear friend of mine, and I know how he can sort of sneak in and ask a question that's going to disarm some folks. But there were about 6 or 7 of these soldiers standing there, and Sam went to the one right in the middle, a young black private. He didn't seek one of the officers or non-commissioned officers. He wanted to talk to this private. So he said to him, well, son, how do you think you're going to do? You know, you're going to be in the ground war in just a couple of days. How do you think you're going to do? Oh, by the way, are you afraid? And the young soldier looked right back at him and said, sir, we're going to do well. We've been out here training. We know what we have to do. We're going to get the job done. I've got good leaders. It's going to be okay. And sir, I'm not afraid. I'm not afraid because I'm with my family. This is my family. We'll take care of each other. We'll accomplish the mission, and we'll get back safely. And that's the spirit that still exists in our armed forces today. It's the spirit that exists in all of the veterans that we celebrate. And when those veterans from these conflicts or earlier conflicts come home, they deserve our deepest thanks. They deserve what the nation can give them. We have the capacity to give them. Jobs, quality education, the best health care possible, but above all, our gratitude, our thanks for all they have done for the nation. I thank all of the veterans organizations that are represented here for their superb work in caring for and embracing our veterans. I've got to tell you that as our history of courage and dedication continues through this new generation of men and women serving the armed forces, I have to point out something that Les touched on, and that it all really began back in 1776. And it began with the Declaration of Independence. And those men sat there and wrote this declaration. And the part that moves all of us the most, the one we know, part of the Declaration know the most, is the second paragraph, which was touched on. We know that beautiful paragraph. We hold these truths to be self-evident. You don't have to think about them. You don't have to study them. They're self-evident. That all men are created equal. That they are endowed by their Creator. An endowment from a Creator, it's not something given to you by the government. It's a Creator-given endowment. And they are endowed with certain unalienable rights. Nothing to question about them. They're unalienable. And that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And then the Declaration of Independence goes on, and it's really a legal document charging the King of England for all the things he has done to Americans here in our colonies, his colonies. The signers of the Declaration were ready to do a lot. 56 men signed that declaration. But before signing the Declaration, they made an oath that inspires us to this day. They said just before they started signing, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That is who we were then. That is who we are now. That is who we must continue to be in the future if we're going to continue to be the leader that wants to be free, if we're going to continue to be the inspiration to the rest of the world, and if we're going to be an inspiration to those young men and women that we will send into battle in the future. The National Veterans Memorial and Museum pays tribute to all our veterans of all our generations, going back to 1776. All of us, through these generations, are willing to make the same kind of sacrifice that our founding fathers made in 1776. That is our obligation is what they gave to us, the responsibility to protect this beloved country of ours and continue to make it an inspiration to the rest of the world, to make sure that we are a democracy that will be looked upon by all around the world as a place of hope, a place of inspiration, a place where people from around the world can go, as my parents did, and become Americans, and all of us can continue to move up in life because of what these founding fathers did, because what we believe in, and because what our veterans were willing to fight for. So thank you for being here today. God bless you all. God bless all our veterans, and God bless America. Thank you.
Please welcome Lieutenant General Michael Farrader to the stage.
Well, it's a great day to be a veteran. It's a great day to be a soldier, a sailor, an airman, Marine, Coast Guardsman. It's a great day to be a citizen here of Columbus, Ohio. It's a great day to be an American. And I've seen a lot of HUA soldiers in my day, a lot of HUA Marines in my day, but I've never seen a more HUA crowd in my day. So how about one big HUA? 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Today's all about people, and that's why you're here and you hung so tight. I just want to say, we are collecting the dots all of our life and then connecting the dots. And the National Veteran Memorial Museum is an example of collecting the dots with big ideas and big people, and then collecting the dots and connecting the dots to the stories of our great veterans. Let's just quickly give a big round of applause to the bands and to the speakers and to the songs, to the Patriot Guards, to our VSOs, and to everyone, even Martin over there, that built this place one screw at a time. Thank you. I really want to welcome you all, and I know in just a minute we're going to conclude and go up and cut a ribbon. The veterans, this is built for you. Families, this represents you. It's a compelling story. It's a fun story. It's an awesome story. I do want to thank a few people, to include Les and Abigail Wexner. I want to thank Colin Powell for being here, Mike Morris. I want to thank Guy Worley and the CDDC. And I've told everyone he's going to look up and say, Senator Glenn, we did it. Guy, congratulations. You know what? I even want to thank God, because he led us to do this, and he'll never let us down. I want to thank Amy Taylor for her unwavering, great attitude, make it happen, pull it together. Let's give Amy a round of applause as well at that level. I've got gobs of families and friends here today. Private Bobby Tuck, where are you? All right, he carried my radio in Alaska. Private Tuck on the glacier from Arkansas saying, it ain't like that where I come from. And First Sergeant Enfinger and Sergeant Major Rice and Ranger Jones. All of these people carry us on their shoulders to success. Thank you all for being here. I love it. And my father was a private in the Army, went to officer candidate school, served in World War II in the Pacific, was very highly decorated, and he always told us that you can't be a leader unless you have someone to lead, and you can't be a good leader unless you take care of them. My mom and dad passed away 20 years ago. In that time, Major General John Hemphill and Peggy Hemphill, my father-in-law and mother-in-law, have helped raise our kids and a brood of about another 18, and now grandkids. And General Hemphill and Miss Hemphill, if you'd stand up for just a second right here, 91-year-old. There we go. I have friends and family. Margie's here, my girlfriend for 42 years, my wife for 39. Think I got those numbers right? And so it's like someone gave you an aircraft carrier, and it's on this giant wooden ramp, and it's got a chain holding it, and a bottle of champagne next to it. And they said, it's running. Well, that's what happened over here. That's what they did. They gave that to us, and they said, you might want to hire a crew. So we, in the last 3 months, have hired the most awesome crew. And many of you leaders of Columbus, Ohio, when I met you, said, if you ever need anything, please let me know. And then I called you back and said, I'm taking your protocol officer. I'm taking your advancement officer. I'm taking your marketing team. Thank you for what you've done for me. Well, along with Samir Bitar and an amazing team from inside the city and outside, we're going to open. So, you know, we're going to do this. We're going to do it for you vets. We're going to do it for duty and humanity. And we're going to hear this. I've already heard it today 10 times. Wow. And we're going to hear this. You guys got this right. And we're going to hear this. I wish my dad was here. And we're going to hear this. My brother came through here a few months ago. He's doing much better. And finally, we're going to hear this. Hey, Granddad, who built this for you? It's amazing. We are so proud to be with you today. Thank you for hanging in. You know, we say in the Rangers, if it ain't raining, we ain't training. This day is perfect for me and for you. And so, Les and General Powell, I think we should probably move up and cut a ribbon. So listen to our announcer. We got one more thing to do, and then we're going to get this museum open. Thank you. God bless you all.
Please rise for the retiring of the colors and remain standing for the performance of the Armed Forces Medley. Veterans, you are encouraged to sing along with your branch of service. That's always a good idea.
We